Welcome to this session on scaling up digital co-creation for sustainable rice and livestock practices. My name is Leni Wallenberg, and I am from the Alliance of Biodiversity and SEAT. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to a set of projects that we're conducting in Brazil and Vietnam to support co-creation of more sustainable practices on rice and livestock. So I think it's no surprise to the people in the session that digital resources provide an extraordinary opportunity to scale up more sustainability. But the problem has been that we've had very linear models of extension, and we've also not captured farmers' contexts or farmers' interests or farmers' priorities very well. And so in this session, what you'll hear is a set of examples of real innovations working with existing tools and significant numbers of farmers on systems really important for climate change and sustainability to improve not just the digital tools, but the digital ecosystem, enabling extensionists to work with farmers and to have a set of performance benchmarks, as well as better technical advisories. So with that, I would like to turn over to our first speaker, Violaine Laurence from Solidaridad, who's going to share with us her work on livestock in Brazil.
Thank you, Leni. Hi, everyone. So my name is Violaine Laurence. I am the Digital Solutions Manager for Solidaridad in Latin America. Solidaridad is an international nonprofit with a 50-year track record fostering inclusive and sustainable value chains. We work in more than 40 countries across the Global South, and this specific project, in partnership with the Alliance, takes place in the Brazilian Amazon in the west of the Pará state. So you can go to the next slide, please. So a few elements of context. Pará is the second largest Brazilian state and the most populous in the entire Amazon biome. Despite major efforts to reduce emissions from land use change, Pará still records high rates of deforestation, mainly driven by the expansion of cattle raising and more recently soy farming. So when it comes to family farming, the main gap in Pará is the lack of good quality technical assistance and rural extension services and the socioeconomic vulnerability of producer families. So 95% of smallholder farms in Pará do not have access to any kind of technical assistance, and this has a clear negative impact on farm productivity and livelihoods, but it also leads to an increased pressure on the environment. So Solidaridad has been working in this region for over 10 years. We started in Novo Repartimento in the Tuere settlement, which is one of the largest settlements in Latin America. And we recently expanded our scope of intervention in the neighboring municipalities of Anapu and Pacajá, which are also along the Trans-Amazonian Highway, as you can see on the map. So currently we work with a group of 1,200 families who produce cocoa and livestock as their main crops. And the average size of the farms is around 60 hectares. It can be up to 300 hectares and still be considered family farming according to the official definition for Pará. So when we started, less than 5% of the livestock farmers had adopted good production practices, such as pasture intensification based on rotational grazing. And important element for our discussion today is that all farmers have a smartphone and use WhatsApp on a daily basis. Connectivity is relatively poor for mobile phone calls in the region, but the vast majority of farmers have a stable on-farm internet connection through satellites. Can go to the next slide. So Solidaridad Amazon program focuses on implementing, together with farmers and local partners, a production model that promotes an increase in family income while ensuring a reduction in carbon emissions and deforestation. And we have developed a technical assistance model, which is powered by the use of digital tools and data. The cornerstone of our approach is Extension Solution, which is a mobile app developed by Solidaridad for field staff. So this app supports our field staff in their daily routines, reducing the burden of record keeping and thus increasing the efficiency of field activities. It provides individual assessment and work plan for every farmer, making it easier to set priorities and track progress. The content of Extension Solution is fully customizable And the version that we use in PADA provides performance assessments and technical guidance on key agroecological and low carbon practices. So overall, the use of this application enabled us to increase the number of farmers supported and the quality of data we collect for monitoring, resulting in improved efficiency and impact. However, we identified a huge opportunity to use digital innovation as a leverage to increase farmer agency in decision-making and foster community-based learning so as to speed up the adoption of agroecological practices. So this is why we partnered with the Alliance as part of the Transitions program to take this digital innovation to the next level. So you can go to the next slide, please. So talking about our joint project, so co-creation is really at the heart of what we do, and we understand co-creation as the collaborative development of practices and solutions among farmers, technical advisors, researchers, and other local stakeholders. So how did we put the principles of co-creation in practice? So the first step that we did was to engage farmers, especially young and women farmers, listen to their needs, and create the conditions for new ideas to emerge in a collaborative way. So to do that, we carried out an intensive round of participatory workshops in the Amazon with a total of 90 people, including 70 farmers. You can go to the next slides. So what came out from these workshops was a deep understanding of existing challenges and opportunities, and also new ideas that we used as guidelines for the improvement of our digital solutions. So on the opportunity side, first insight is WhatsApp is currently the major communication channel from extensionists to farmers and for farmer-to-farmer interaction. Given literacy limitations, the use of audio messages has been much more effective than text. Second, farmers, mainly the young ones, use digital platforms such as YouTube, TikTok, Kwai to access technical content about production practices, but they really face challenges to find reliable quality content adapted to their reality. So they say there's too much information available, which is not relevant to our reality, and we waste our time looking at the right information. Third insight is that farmers would have more confidence in the digital content if it were produced in their region and by their peers, by other farmers. And finally, in terms of opportunity, young farmers and women are very much interested in producing their own technical content for digital channels and to receive training for more advanced use of smartphones and digital platforms. So many dreams and ideas came out from the group discussions, and we selected the insights that are more directly applicable to the scope of our project. So first thing, in terms of content, farmers ask for training and information about the how. So what are the practices that are adapted to the local context to increase yield and climate resilience, how they can access credit, etc. But they also want to have information about the why. So for instance, the link between deforestation and climate change, and also what are the concrete benefits of adopting improved production practices, including financially. So farmers are also keen to share their own experiences and learn from others that they call the familiar faces via digital channels. But for these to function, it's absolutely critical to do curation and classification of content by topic, location, keyword, so as to facilitate access and retain users. Another insight that came up from this discussion is the idea of a digital learning community online and offline. So the idea of a community where people can find locally relevant information about practices. It also can participate in online and face-to-face exchange space and are invited to think about new solutions and also contribute to the creation of good practices. Another aspect is the important role of local influences and of local success stories. This is really key to create trust and ensure that action is taken. So an idea that popped up during the workshop is to create maps with demo plots, producers, local partners that can share knowledge and success stories in the territories at local level, and they can also organize learning events offline. And last but not least, recognition. farmers ask for mechanisms to recognize the ones who already adopt good practices, to give visibility to what is already being done, and also to encourage them with incentives, including financial ones. So this is what came up from the workshop, and now I will give you a sneak peek into what we are now developing and testing on the ground. So you can go next. Thank you. So we do not start from scratch, and we do not reinvent the wheel. So the starting point is extension solution that already existed, WhatsApp, and the digital video platform that farmers already use. So on one side, we enhanced the extension solution with a new feature to increase the focus on agroecological practices and encourage two-way interaction between extension staff and farmers. And on the other side, we developed a complementary interface for farmers that we call Solis. Can go next. So very quickly, the new feature of extension solution. So it's a functionality where extension staff can select priority practices with high focus on agroecology. They can customize the individual action plan, agree on a deadline with farmers, and add individual instructions, including via audio. And then they can share the action plan with the farmer. So you can go next. And the way it works for the farmer is that the farmer receives a link on WhatsApp, just has to click, and then it opens Solis. So there is no need to download a new app nor to register, because we know this is a challenge for farmer. And then the farmer can access the solution. So on one side, the farmer can access his or her individual action plan. They can update the status of tasks. They can also upload evidence and request validation from the extensionist. And they can also contact the extension officer directly to ask questions. And the second block, so you can go next, which is actually the most innovative part of our work, is the development of what we call a community-driven content repository, together with the social mechanism to foster and sustain generation and sharing of knowledge. So we really think about this platform as a social technology powered by a digital tool. And the objective is to encourage farmers and extension staff to create their own videos, upload them on existing platforms such as YouTube, Quai, etc., and then share on Solis, where a process of content curation and classification takes place, and where a gamified experience is proposed to encourage interactions and cooperation online and offline. So you can go to the next slide. So our objective is really to build a kind of informational solidarity network aimed at supporting individual and collective decision-making by using content generated by the community, with the ultimate goal of building a collective path towards agroecological transition. And this is already taking place in the field. So these are very recent pictures from the Amazon, with farmers and extension staff starting to produce their own videos. And very soon we will also train young farmers who will become the ambassadors of the agroecological transition in Para, and share their knowledge with their peers. That's it for me. Thank you for your attention. And now I think Trang will share what they have been doing in Vietnam.
Thank you, Violet. Allow me 1 minute to share my screen. Hello to everyone, and I am Trang from the International Rice Research Institute, and it is my pleasure today to share with you the work that we are working on to develop new tools to support the benchmarking of performance for improved rice farming packages for sustainable rice production in Vietnam. So to set the scene, there's some background information that improved rice farming practices have been promoted quite widely in Vietnam, especially in the Mekong River Delta, which is the largest rice production area of Vietnam, with the purpose to improve quality of rice, reduce agronomical inputs, reduce costs, and increase profits for farmers, as well as to improve the resilience to climate change, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and reduce negative environmental impacts from rice farming. Some examples of these very broadly applied packages include the 1-must-do-5 reductions, which advises farmers to use certified seed and reduce seed rate, fertilizer application, pesticide application, irrigation water, and post-harvest losses. Similarly, the 3 reductions, 3 gains package also advises farmers to reduce some agronomical inputs in order to gain productivity, efficiency, and quality. Some other examples include the system of rice intensification or sustainable rice platform. Inspired that these packages are applied quite widely in the deltas areas of Vietnam, the instructions for these practices are quite general. So when they're applied in the field, the local agricultural officials will provide specific advisory to farmers based on the local context, based on the season, and based on their experience. On another note, we conducted a survey last year on rice farming practices in the area, and results show that farmers work very closely and extensively with field agents in terms of receiving and exchanging information for technical advisories to improve their farming practices. And this information is quite comprehensive. It covers all of the activities from the beginning of the season to harvesting and post-harvest. It also covers climate change mitigation and adaptation topics, although these are a little bit less common compared to the other practices. However, the methods of receiving technical advisories by farmers majorly are still verbal-based or are non-digitized. So only 12% of them receive information through some kinds of digital means, including mainstream media like television or radio. And the majority still rely on meeting with field agents or talking with other members in the community. On the other hand, though, reporting of practices is very limited. Only less than 20% of the survey farmers do report their farming practices to either agriculture technician or to the cooperatives or to the companies or other farmers. More than 60% of them still do not report their farming practices very systematically. And among those who do, still rely on verbal means of communications or phone calls, and none of them use any emails or web-based system or mobile apps to share information on their practices. So we have been working with farmers and field agents, and the highlights are that improved rice practices are quite widely adopted already. However, the benchmarks or the extent to which these practices are applied vary from place to place, from case to case, from season to season. And there's been no standard or specific site-specific advisory that farmers can rely to. There has also been a lack of systematic compilation and use of farming records from individual farmers. And this is to say that information from farmers is very valuable. However, it has not been collected and compiled very systematically for the purpose of community learning or co-creation of knowledge. We also survey farmers in terms of what would they want to see in a digital tool, and the most desired feature include to record practices, to share these practices with their peers or with field agents, and also to receive advice on the use of agronomical inputs and service sourcing. So based on what we've learned from the community, from farmers and the field agents, we have been working on some innovations to try to address this shortcoming. The first innovation that we're working on is a performance assessment tool that collects farming practice information from users. And these users includes field agents and farmers, and sends these farming practice information to a database for the assessment of agroecological practices, climate change resilience, and mitigation. At the same time, the data related to practices that emit greenhouse gas emission is sent through an API that connects to a greenhouse gas calculator developed by ERI called Sector. And then this API will return the results of greenhouse gas calculations back to the farmers and also to contribute to the set assessments. So these calculations are case specific and individual farmers can have their own results. And as said, the assessment results will be sent back to the farmers through this app, through this assessment tool, to support the feedback of field agents and advisory of how the farmers are performing at a specific season or time. I would also like to mention that these innovations are associated with a larger system of data collection and monitoring of rice production being developed and will be implemented by the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. So the data collected through these innovations will contribute to developing knowledge and information on a large scale that will inform decision making, community learning, and then it will go back to the individual users of the innovations. A little bit more detail of how the application works. So it supports field agents to collect practice data from by interviewing farmers. And then the tool will return the performance assessment instantly to the field agents that can then be informed to farmers. And it will support field agents to customize advisory or feedback to the farmers. Data will be recorded in an anonymous manner for analysis and improvement of advisory on a larger scale. And there is the potential to connect to carbon credit projects because these projects have different levels of verification, and one of them includes to verify, to collect field data to verify the practices by farmers. And this is an example of how data provided by farmers will contribute to community learning and co-creating agroecological practices. So farmers can see their performance on, for example, seed rate, fertilizer rate, drainage events in terms of irrigation, pesticide application, or greenhouse gas emissions. And these are on their specific field in a specific season. And the ranges of these practices can be adjusted according to the data submitted by their peers. So this is a reflection of how the community is doing and where a specific farmer is performing in relation to other farmers. So therefore, farmers can see and adjust their own practices, or the management bodies called the cooperatives or field agents can also, based on the analysis of a large database, to adjust the extent of to which the practices should be adopted, or how farmers should improve further. So with that, I'd like to close my presentation, and I hope this information has been helpful to you, and I'm very happy to look forward to further discussion. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chang. So those two presentations were representing the two projects of the Agroecological Transitions Digital Tools Project, or what we call ATDT. And we'll now turn to a third project, which is being run by GFRAS. And it's my pleasure to introduce Ingrid Oliveira from GFRAS, the Global Forum for Rural Advisory Services, to talk, to have some reflections about the experience in Brazil and Vietnam, but also to share the results of a digital advisory study that they conducted globally. So over to you, Ingrid.
Thank you, Lini. I will also share my screen. as we talk a little bit about the things we have just seen, maybe just as a quick background before, what GFRAS did was to conduct a study financed by GIZ on analyzing and understanding existing digital solutions globally that had an extension component, and trying to draw a line or trying to understand whether there were elements that made them more likely to succeed in the long term. So we analyzed a vast universe of existing digital solutions, but we were looking to some specific. And for us, it's also very interesting to see the thought process behind what is being done in Brazil and what is being done in Vietnam, to see whether it matches the reality. Coincidentally, we've also looked at Latin America and in Southeast Asia. So we had the regional networks of GFRA, so extension regional networks in these areas, looking at the scenario and the settings in these parts of the world as well, to see what worked there. Because of course, we cannot say that the scenario or the enabling factors or the enabling environment is going to be the same globally. So it is important to look regionally also at are the policies in place to support digital solutions? Is the government supporting these initiatives or not? Who is doing this work? Is the investment, are investment partners also willing to support that, and so on and so forth. So I hope I can share now the screen on what is it that we did. Here we are. So as I mentioned, this is the study we did. And very specifically, what we were looking at was try to understand what were current potentials and challenges regarding digitalization and advisory services, what were proven approaches that were actually getting to scale. So what sort of digital solutions were out there that managed to go to scale in their regions? And of course, scale in different regions meant different things, depending on what size of populations you are working with. And of course, what were the operational and institutional implications of using this? How was this changing the advisory scenario? What did we need to do in terms of supporting more the extension providing agencies or the extension providers themselves in working in this new environment? And there were 4 studies in which we conducted this, 4 regions in which we conducted this study: Anglophone Africa, Francophone Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. Each one of these areas produced a regional report that will be available very soon, where they talk about which digital solutions they looked at, which ones they chose to look closer, that were meeting the criteria of being, available at scale, being sustainably, financially sustainable, and so on. And what could we learn from these solutions in terms of what was being done well for them to stay in a long term, and what could be improved. So one data or one element that was quite shocking for us at the beginning was when we looked at digital apps in general globally. And here we're not talking only about agroecology or agriculture or extension, but we're talking about digital apps in general. Only 0.5% of apps managed to be successful. As you see here in this graph, 67.8 are below 1,000 downloads. So you will never even get 1,000 downloads. Of those who do, only 17.9% of them have actually active users, because one thing is to download the app, the other thing is to keep coming back to this app and using it for what is actually intended. Only 7 out of those then that managed to have more than 1,000 active users, 7.2 had no revenue or profit at all. So whether they were, what's the business model that we're looking at here? Is this a project funding that therefore will have a project flow funds forever that will enable people to keep using these apps? Or does it have to have some sort of sustainable longer term financial, business model that allows it to survive further? And out of those, of course, 6.6% also suffered with a lack of user retention. So people use, but do people use it sustainably for a long time and don't delete this app? So once all of this was looked at, it was only 0.5% of the apps that actually met all of this criteria. So what we wanted to keep looking at was, are there things that we can identify or are there elements that we can point out that maybe help these apps reaching the 0.5%, and what did we identify, especially in extension and advisory services? So the study is much longer. We have lots of recommendations. We work with the digital principles, a principle for digital development as well. We look at what is the role of the private sector, what is the role of the public sector, where do they work well, in all of these examples, where have we seen that they actually act up to their strengths? Of course, a lot on what is the potential for public-private partnerships, because this is something that has been identified in this study as a, very fertile ground for pushing these apps much further. And here are just a set of recommendations that came out of this study based on everything that we've seen. For the public sector, the strengths lie on working on the enabling environment, ensuring that the conditions are there for people to use these apps, for them to be developed, be it, of course, in terms of infrastructure, a bit of what Violaine was saying in Pará. I'm from Brazil, so I know the reality. It's a massive state. Even the infrastructure to be able to have cell phone towers or to be able to be connected and remain connected at a reasonable level, this is where the public sector strength should be. Of course, creating a policy framework that is conducive for private sector and not-for-profit actors, including the issue of data governance. Training and capacity building, especially for advisory service organizations and field workers, for them to be able to work on this area and use that. How can they share also, how can the public sector share successful business models for public-private partnerships? And of course, they are very often the ones providing access to relevant updated data via the geographics or institutes of statistics. And this is where we've seen that the role of public sector in app development or in digital extension was being strongest. It was very nice seeing in the case of Brazil, or in this app that you mentioned, many of the things that were recommended in our study, they are there. Or I know that it's still being development, but when we talk about using open source tools, keeping short feedback loops, between the user and what is it that you want them to give back to you. It's easy to use, and of course, using social media platforms and elements that are already there. As you said, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, so you want to work where people already are. One thing that we saw that is very successful and could also help apps in Brazil or in Vietnam is bundling of services. To offer, you mentioned the access to financing, but of course, is it climate? Is it weather information? Is it access to inputs, or what is it? The more bundled these services were, the more relevant these apps remained in the long term, and the easier it was also for them to have a sustainable, business model. One thing that we saw in terms for the global community, so for the public sector, those are the recommendations that came of the study. For the global community, we think that here are many opportunities to, when we talk about gender, climate change, youth engagement, generational renewal, add those topics as cross-cutting agendas to services that are already there. Instead of creating specific, apps or solutions or new digital solutions for that, try to think of what are ways in which we can do those in existing apps, find partnerships, but as cross-cutting topics, cross-cutting teams. What is highly desired is, to have a framework to analyze and guide the adequacy of the project and program design for this digital agricultural advisory services investment and easy comparison. What do I get when I do what? As we say, stop reinventing, start investing. The likelihood that we develop one of these apps that gets to the 0.5% is not very high. So we should really pay attention to what is out there, what is working well, and how can we collaborate and work together with these partners. As we say, investors should actually consider scaling existing effective and reliable systems, regardless if they are operated by public, private, not-for-profit actors, or a combination of all of those. And of course, what we also saw in this study is if you want to invest in something new, public-private, sequential public-private partnerships is where we saw the biggest number of examples succeeding. And just to conclude, when we talk about, because I know the topic here is we're also talking about inclusion. So what we saw is that the gaps still exist in digital apps. when we're talking about gender and accessing women. There is maybe a chance to bridge this gap a little bit, to also use innovation as a ways to reach, innovation and technology as a ways of reaching young people. But if we are developing extension or digital apps that are modeled after broken systems, they will also bring these broken elements into them. So we need to think, what is it that is not working in and within extension? Is it co-creation? Is it that we need to come closer to the communities before we develop these apps? Is it that we need to integrate the advisories and the service providers and the government and all of them in one service instead of working separately in silos? So this is really what we would like to recommend. And this is also what made us happy to see. We saw that the app in Vietnam, it sounds much more technical in the way that you describe it, how the input is given. It sounds like it's very geared in a way towards the advisors themselves. So one suggestion would be to see, when coming to the farmers, really simplifying the language, making sure that they can explain to their peers how is it that this works. Because if they understand, if they really believe in it, then the chances are that it really stays on for longer. So this is really what we would have to say on that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ingrid. And I've put a link to the GFRAS report and also to the outputs from the ATDT project in the chat for those who are interested. I encourage everybody to put your questions into the Q&A section. We now have about 20 minutes for any questions that you may have. Just to recap, so we heard from Violaine from Solidaridad about Solace as a opportunity to better respond to what farmers are already doing and to support a more social technology approach to the use of the digital resources that are available, illustrating very much how one can build on what farmers are already doing, what farmers' interests are, and also recognizing the need for farmers to have some kind of financial benefit. In Chang's case, very different model, working with the national government and having the potential to scale nationally for rice systems, and understanding that performance benchmarks will be critical for both not only reporting upwards to policymakers, but among farmers to support the development of their practices, and also enabling learning among farmers, exchange among farmers. So really, really interesting and contrasting models. And then finally with Ingrid, looking at the big picture with this sobering number of 0.5 apps that are successful, and therefore making the case really that we do need to understand the users. We need to understand that farmers don't necessarily have direct access to digital tools. How can they best be supported through, for example, extensionists and other advisors that are working most closely with them. So with that, I see we have two questions to start with. And the first is from Vivian Filippi from IFAD, one of our donors. Thank you, Vivian. IFAD and EC are the two donors on this project, or the EU. Vivian writes, thank you for the great presentations. I was wondering if you already considered how to work with extensionists, or how the work with extensionists and local and national decision makers to curate and systematize the data for M&E can inform the policy dialogue and agroecology. In other words, how are we using the data that might be collected, I think primarily in Vietnam in this case, to support the policy on agroecology? Over to you, Chang.
Thank you for the question. As briefly stated in my presentation, the data that is collected through the application will be fed into a wider system of a web-based system managed by the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, and it will serve as a source of information to firstly validate the information reported through the government system, and also to provide empirical data from the field to as a means to bring the voice of the information from farmers to the dialogue through data analysis, so policymakers can have a better view of what is actually happening on the field and what is the trend of changes in agroecological practices to inform their decision making. And one example that has been shown is how policymakers can track the production of rice in response to different climate risks, and they can provide technical advisory to farmers to either shift the season or change the calendar of rice establishments so they can avoid salinity intrusion. And that is one of the examples that has been done to show how information from the field can support the dialogue of policy making, and how it goes back to benefit farmers. And with that in mind, we are trying to create these innovations so to foster this kind of exchange of information further, and extend it to the topic of climate change mitigation. So practice information from the field can also support to validate information in terms of greenhouse gas emission possibility in rice production that will be managed or monitored at the central level to inform how the government would like to scale mitigation practices based on the current adoption or based on how farmers can respond, how farmers can perform in that sense. So I hope that answers the question.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chung. We have another yeah, Violaine, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to share the perspective from Brazil. So first of all, thank you very much, Vivian, for your great question. That's fantastic. And this is exactly what we are planning to do for next year. So in Brazil, we already work with local extension services providers. We work with cooperative and other actors with the idea of incubating our technical assistance model powered by digital tools. And we also participate in different platforms at the state and at national level, where we do use the insights from the data we collect on the ground to share and to drive the agenda of these initiatives. We are not yet using data in a more systematized way to really inform policy dialogue, but this is something that we plan to start in the coming months, working more directly with coalitions and platforms, and also with the local secretary, agricultural secretary of the state of Pará. So I think this will take time, but this is exactly what we plan to do in the future. So thanks for that.
Exactly, the key to scaling. We have another question from Jutiman Chowdhury saying, thank you. For the rice case in Vietnam, how many farmers are currently using the system, and how is the system integrated with the extension system? Is this a public sector service provided free of cost to farmers? Chung?
Thank you for the interest and the questions. So the innovations that were presented are in development, and we will be testing these innovations in the next farming season with extensionists and with farmers. The idea of embedding this innovation into the nationally managed system is to explore the possibilities to scale it on a larger scale into other areas of rice farming as well. So once the innovations will launch, then we'll try with different models of scaling, including working with extensionists, working with local agricultural offices, as well as private companies, because there has been interest shown by these agencies, organizations, and companies to monitor practices of farmers and to work more closely with farmer extensionists to improve performance in terms of improving quality, reducing inputs, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Regarding the fees, the extension services provided to farmers are free to farmers, so it's part of the public services, and therefore the app will also be free for use, and there will be no charge for the service of the innovations.
Thank you. I have a question, just a reminder to the audience, please put your questions into the Q&A. I have a question for Ingrid. Now that you've completed your study and have a picture of what needs to happen, what are the next steps for GFRAS, and how would you be supporting digital solutions of the sort that Violaine and Chung are discussing?
what we definitely are going to work on next is identifying the gaps in professionalization. So professionalization of advisory services is something that GFRAS works very strongly, very closely with. So understanding is that we have a model and an information, so let's say educational package called the New Extensionist Learning Kit, where it has competencies, it trains people on competencies that are also soft skills, hard skills and soft skills. So we have some technical modules, but also some on facilitation, co-creation. So we definitely want to expand that to include modules on how can you co-create together with the farmers. So that is more on the extension side. We also developed a model on e-extension, so supporting extension workers in those gaps and how can they actually even use the solutions, or how can they fill in these forms? How can they make sure that this data is uploaded safely? When we talk about open air, open access data, this is one thing to say, okay, but what about offline data access? Online data access is easier to promote, but many of the communities that we are working on are actually completely offline. So how can we also make sure that there is open data access for those communities? So these are discussions and advocacy discussions that we try to promote on. So for GFRAS, it's mostly working on the enabling environment for extension and extension communities to better promote or use these apps.
Fantastic, thank you. So in our project, we've also been grappling with the question of how do you take these principles for inclusive digital development, and how do you apply them in practical ways in the development of an actual tool? And we, as you'll see in the outputs that I shared in the chat, do have a list of 6 core principles that are not terribly surprising for co-creation and social inclusion. But as you'll see from the tools that were developed, not all of the principles can be met fully. We can make advances in some, but not in others. For example, digital access by broadband just isn't available to all farmers everywhere. And so I wanted to ask Violaine and Chung especially to comment on sort of theory versus practice, principles versus practice. What did you, with those principles in mind at the start of the project, how did you practically work to solve the problems, and what kinds of obstacles did you meet that made meeting those principles difficult? Maybe Violaine first.
Sure, thank you for that question, Lini. So there is indeed a gap between the theory and the practice. So the approach that we have been adopting within Solidaridad is a bit to prioritize with a time frame perspective. So for us, really, the priority was to focus on the principles for co-creation and engagement of farmers and have this collaborative approach. But we are very much aware that we cannot meet with all the principles at first, mainly in this development phase. So for instance, one of the challenges for us are the principles regarding open data and open source. And this is mainly due to the challenge of building a sustainable business model, because it is very clear that if so many digital applications fail, as we saw on Ingrid's slide, it's also because there is no business model. And it's really challenging to build a sustainable business model when you're still in the development phase, because you need actually to have massive data to build a sustainable business model and being able to deliver services and then be able to charge for these services. So with Solidaridad, our approach has been to start first with a proprietary system. So we did not start open source because we understood that we needed to start in a more controlled environment to be able to develop and to test in a very collaborative way with extension staff and farmers. But then we have the perspective that when our tool will achieve a more mature level, then we may go open source. But for us, the most important aspect is actually to go open data and create the conditions for interoperability and make sure that data can be used by other organizations like, to inform public policies and also to support cooperatives and other agents. So for us, it's a kind of, stepwise approach where you have to prioritize some principles and really stick to that. And then over time, you can then incorporate and take it to the next level by complying with the other principles.
Thank you. And Chao?
Yes, for the case of the Mekong Delta River in Vietnam, we also saw obstacles or challenges in terms of reaching farmers, especially those that are currently not reached by digital apps, or currently who do not have so much of the access to digital innovations, which is why we consider working with extensionists, because Vietnam has a very wide network of extensionists whose mandate is to work with farmers, all of the rice farmers. So the expectation is through working with extensionists, we can reach as many farmers as possible. But the challenge is really how the innovation will be uptaken by users over time. So the usefulness of the database or the usefulness of the apps will rely a lot on the volume of data that is inputted into the system. And therefore, we are thinking of trying different models in terms of reaching our farmers and extensionists through either private companies, through different projects, or through the government systems. And as Violaine said, we also try to prioritize the principles that we can uphold at the moment, and then expand to the other principles as we evolve.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. So Ingrid, extensionists are working often face-to-face with farmers, and digital tools are not. Could you comment a little bit on the face-to-face versus digital tool value in conveying information and supporting practice change?
What we definitely saw is the potential for complementarity of these services, right? We are not saying here that the digital apps or the digital services will replace the advisors, because there are so many issues. There's issues of trust. If we're not even talking about accessibility, internet connection, there will also be the issues of culture, trust, change, that we are definitely not going to advocate. But maybe the apps, they can be a starting point, or they can act also as a replicator, where in the areas where the extensionist doesn't reach so fast or so quickly. I mean, there's questionable, or we're always discussing exactly the data. But if we say that some of the data that is out there says that we only reach 25% of the farmers through extension, through face-to-face extension, and of course, these are the ones that are easiest to reach. These are the ones that are closest to the roads. These are the ones that are closest to the structures we already have. So maybe there is this potential that the digital services, they can reach a little bit more of those farmers. Of course, as we said, we have to be attentive that it just doesn't replicate broken systems, and therefore continues with gender gaps, continues with a lot of information gaps that we need to work on to avoid that they are replicated. But they for sure, and one of the things, since we're talking again about inclusion, is the potential to have younger people more in. We have to bring younger people into agriculture and extension again. So the potential to work connected to society with technology might mean that we have more people, not only with the apps, but that we have more extensions then working face-to-face with farmers, and then replicating what they see and what they learn, what they co-create. So to bring people in, to potentially widen it, but never to replace.
Very nice, and consistent with what we're also finding for complementarity. So I apologize that Guy for our European Union donor who was going to provide closing remarks is not available to join us because of some technical issues. But I wanted to just provide some closing remarks. First, I want to sincerely thank all of the speakers, and particularly our ATDT partners for all the hard work that they're doing on the ground, and Ingrid for her comments and the complementary work at the global level and the important scaling up of all of these findings. I also want to thank Sadie Shelton, who helped to organized this session and put a lot of work on the backstage aspects, and of course to our sponsors and the organizers of this overall conference. In terms of just wrapping up, I think, we talk a lot about inclusion in terms of just providing access, and we talk a lot about user-based design. But in fact, providing access is not possible. The enabling environment often doesn't exist. And user-based design is important, but it really doesn't get at what we need for scaling up new practices, which is that interaction between farmers and others, whether it's other farmers, other extension agents or scientists or policymakers. And so what you've seen here are examples, I think, very much of a more bottom-up digital ecosystem building, how we can understand the social context of what farmers need, what farmers are doing, and then build digital resources and how those digital resources are used in ways that support farmers to engage with that wider set of information, and hopefully then to scale up practices more broadly. A second major observation is that I think in all of these cases, we've heard about we think about the theory and the principles for inclusion, but the practice is different. So in the Violen's case, we know that the practice involves having a business model that doesn't allow necessarily open access to information. And in the case of Vietnam, we have a broader a performance benchmark system that is being driven by parties that are not necessarily from the bottom up, but will hopefully also enable that. Finally, I just want to conclude by saying, despite all of these wonderful digital resources, that human element and the trust in trusted intermediaries is going to continue to be essential. And so there will be limits to what digital tools can do, but ultimately they also expand what we can do as well. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the participants and the speakers, and wish everybody a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Enjoy the rest of the event.